Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Join us for tonight's episode of Mom Please. In this corner, we have the villain from Illinois, the kid from Shy City, the millennial menace, Eric the Invincible. And tonight, taking on our silver-tongued host, the Invincible's worthy opponent, the dame of debate, the boomer from Bridgeport, the lady with the Mercedes, Carol the Crusher. Who are the millennials? Are they equipped to take on the valiant baby boomers? Are the aging baby boomers physically and mentally able to defeat the uncompromising millennials? What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? We are sure to find out tonight. Let the battle begin!
Well, good evening, folks. That was
hey, everybody.
That is our introduction. I'm Carol.
I'm Eric. Nice to see you all again.
And as you know, we are mother and son, and we happen to be of the generations of millennial and boomer. And we thought that this could be a nice conversation for us to have. So I will open us up with who the boomers are. So starting with boomers born between 1946 and 1964, post-war. There was a glut of babies during that period. Now think about that. Boomers are old. We are 61 to 78 years old.
You guys aren't that old. You still got some life in you.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's some life in the old bones.
Some of you are still in the go-go years.
Yeah, but the post-World War II birth rates grew because GIs came back. They had the GI Bill. There was affordable housing. There was a plethora of jobs. We were in the process of helping rebuild Europe. So lots of American goods were manufactured and sent over to Europe to help them get back on their feet.
Right.
So that post-war economy was extraordinarily strong.
Right.
And companies recognized that they had to essentially market to those families, and they did. So the economy flourished. Families were able to have more children. There was the beginning of readily available birth control during that period of time. So families could grow how they wanted to grow, not accidentally. So families became larger. Marriage rates were off the charts until the 1970s, and being a family meant movement to the suburbs, getting a good education, buying a house. Some famous influential boomers include...
This is always fun to talk about.
Bill Gates.
Okay.
Oprah Winfrey. Steve Jobs, and of course Wozniak.
Right, the Apple guys.
The Donald Trump.
Oh, great.
Clinton. George Bush.
Yeah.
Barack Obama.
Most
the
of
great
our last
one,
presidents.
right? The great one, Wayne Gretzky. Michael Jordan.
Like the goats.
The GOAT.
The goat athletes.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, Arnold. He had that great Super Bowl commercial. Like a good neighbor.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. David Bowie.
Yeah.
Sting, Howard Stern, Johnny Depp, George Clooney, Tom Hanks, Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson.
I love that guy. He's really funny.
And then there's, more dubious people.
Sure.
Pablo Escobar, Jeffrey Dahmer, Vladimir Putin. But what all of these people have in common is they were very driven individuals. None of them are soft and fluffy.
Sounds kind of weird to hear you say that about Jeffrey Dahmer, but he was driven in a way, right?
He was driven.
Yikes.
He was driven to,
Yikes. Okay, moving on.
Right.
Moving on.
Okay, moving on. He was good at his work.
Sure. Okay, moving on.
Right.
Moving on. Let's go. What else about the boomers?
Okay, so
Mom, please.
We also see the Korean War, McCarthyism, the Red Scare, the space race, which ultimately ends with the moon landing in '69.
Yep.
The birth of going from big band swing music to more Elvis type music to really the quintessential rock and roll band, which, marked by the Beatles. And I'd be chagrined if I didn't mention the Rolling Stones.
Of course, your boy Mick. Yeah.
Yeah, my boy Mick. The civil rights movement.
Yeah.
The second wave of feminism in the 60s to 80s. During
Okay.
that period of time, it's historic that women end up in boardrooms. Women end up around the table as real decision makers and not just secretaries getting coffee for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's bad stuff, the Vietnam War,
Sure.
Watergate,
Sure.
OPEC won't sell us any oil because we're
Yeah.
sovereign to
It's like the energy
Israel,
crisis. Yeah.
right? The AIDS epidemic, Chernobyl, the space shuttle Challenger explosion, which I
Yeah.
remember exactly where I was when that occurred. I
Yeah.
mean,
I have
it's
something like that in my mind
I
as well. Yeah.
um, and the stock market crash of '87, and of course the downturn in 2008. So we've witnessed
A lot
so
of things.
much, a
Yeah.
lot of things,
A lot of changes.
and we've witnessed all of the presidential uh, people from JFK down to Joe Biden at this point in time.
Right.
And
Right.
what's the significant thing I'll say about that is, so we see for the first time in our lives someone get assassinated as the president. We
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
somebody get impeached and resign, and we see somebody take over, move into the presidency because of that as the vice president. So we've seen a lot of unusual
A lot of
president.
firsts.
Right,
Right.
a lot of
A lot of
well,
firsts.
they're not all first necessarily, but in a small period of time, we've seen a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our characteristics include: we are the first generation to break away from our families of origin, meaning that prior generations, grandma lived down the street, you lived in the house next door, somebody else lived in an aunt and uncle lived in
Everybody
the
was
house
in
next
the
door.
neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the first generation to really spread out, move to different cities, take jobs and opportunities outside, far away from their families. In general, boomers have youthful values. They think about their lives in terms of a younger demographic. Like I would say, my mother at my age is an older person, emotionally, physically, than I am at the same age.
What do you how would you like define that? What do you mean exactly by like
I
is it a
am still
values
for
thing or
no,
you're
I'm still forward looking. I'm still trying to learn things.
okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am still trying to contribute to society in some way.
Okay. Okay. And you feel
Okay.
like your mother at your age was
Yeah,
not.
she's
She was kind of
retired
like,
and
okay, I'm retired. It's,
I'm a
time
grandma,
for me to, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We value education very highly. We are the second highest educated generation next to the millennials.
Okay.
And we like the idea of an old dog can learn new tricks, right?
Yeah.
We are focused on improving ourselves, whether it's through our work, our physical selves. We want to be healthy. We are interested in our emotional, how we deal with our emotions, or our romances, or our spiritual lives. We're always seeking, we're always questioning, we're always looking for improvement, no matter what age. It's interesting. We're creative, but I'd say through our work and through how we seek entertainment.
Okay.
I don't think that by and large boomers had the most creative jobs. There's a lot of accountants and
Sure.
lawyers and so forth.
Yeah.
Boomers want to take on the world. We're the generation that came up with the bucket list.
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
that we want to experience life through seeing the world. And this was best described to me by my friend Karen, who said that there's three parts of your life as a boomer. There's the go-go years where you still keep going, you can still do all the traveling and biking and hiking that you ever did. And
Right.
then there's the slow-go years where you can still do it, but maybe you have to go on a cruise.
Maybe you take like an electric bicycle or something like
Right.
that.
Okay. Don't mock the electric bike. You still have to pay.
Hey, they're pretty cool. I have yet to try one. They seem pretty neat. Honestly. No, I'm not even kidding. They go fast.
And then there's the no-go years where maybe you are confined to your home, you're more homebound or more
Yeah.
community bound, but maybe you seek out relationships and learn about younger people in your community or so forth. So you're always in the process of trying to self-improve, I guess.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
We are the largest uh, group voting bloc. We are the wealthiest and the most powerful in the United States.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
That's because a lot of babies were born.
Yeah. And you've had a
we-
lot of time to get value. You've had a long period of time to generate this wealth and this influence.
Right. Versus the millennial who hasn't
Right.
been able to generate as much wealth at the same
Yeah.
age. Boomers value giving back. We are interested in providing donations. We're interested in providing our time and talent to organizations. And we find just the giving provides us with, a good feeling and satisfaction.
Okay.
We care about how we're going to be remembered. So we care about our legacies.
Yeah, that L word.
Yes, which sometimes when I'm naughty, I'm a little worried about my legacy. Boomers are highly goal-oriented. When I was a young boomer in my 20s, we used to say, "Oh, you've arrived if you've made $30,000 by your 30th year." So it was called 30 by 30. I know that seems like a pittance
Seems
now,
like such a small amount now, but I mean inflation, that's natural.
it was a thing. So
yeah. What would that like $30,000 get you? Is there like something attached to that, or is that like savings? Like, what is it like about a house, like a down payment on a home, like a car?
No, you'd be able to save. You would be able to take vacations. You would be able to have a nice lifestyle and do things.
Okay, so it's like an indicator of your lifestyle at that point is where you want it to be.
Right.
Okay.
Most people at that point had a steady career. They probably owned a car, probably in the process of starting to look for real estate.
Home ownership. Yeah.
We're also, even though the marital arrangements move forward till the 1970s, the uptick in marriage goes till then. After that time, it wanes a little bit due to the fact that the no-fault divorce came into play, and states granted no-fault divorces. So somebody didn't have to be the bad person.
There didn't have to be a reason why you wanted to get a divorce. You could just get a divorce if you wanted to. So that happens around the time of like the birth control pill, the sexual revolution, right? All of that kind of comes together in the 60s and 70s to create that environment.
People just start creating new realities for what their lifestyle could look like, and it wasn't always traditional marriage.
Yeah.
Boomers love to own things. We like houses. We like nice things in our houses. We like nice cars. We like to join clubs. We just are people who, I guess, for better or for worse, we have some status symbols that we like.
Yeah.
But I'd also say that boomers take care of their stuff.
Yeah.
That's the converse of that. And again, boomer parenting, let me give you an example of that. We want the best for our children. We want to make sure they go to college. We are achievement oriented for our children. So our children were given expectations by us to achieve, but we also cared about their stop. But we also cared about their emotional well-being.
I didn't even say anything.
We also cared about their emotional well-being in terms of, that's when we started talking to them differently, and we started asking them how they felt about situations.
Yeah.
And if somebody was giving them a hard time in school, we were likely to give them ideas to help them through that, or ultimately maybe even get involved. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
boomer,
Okay. Sound true?
Yeah,
so
sounds
boomers
true. Sounds right.
Are empathic. We engage in our communities. We're hopeful, and we are grateful for everything that we have. That
Okay.
is, by definition of all the reading I've done and through my experience, the
Yeah.
boomer.
Are you grateful for all of the leaded products that you had to deal with, like gasoline and paint and stuff?
Yeah. Well, okay.
I mean, my own generation has that issue with like plastics and stuff. But yeah, anyway. So we've gone over boomers a little bit. So I'm going to take the time to basically do the same thing for millennials. So millennials are born between the years of 1981 and 1996. This would make our generation between the ages of 27 and 43 right now. So basically beyond college years, maybe some are still doing some graduate, postgraduate work, but pretty much well into careers at this point. Having kids, starting families, settling down into kind of, I think a lot of us are starting to move away from the cities and settle down into the more suburban lifestyle, but that's a little bit more of an anecdotal thing than completely statistic based. So some famous influential millennials, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, some of the great soccer players of our generation. We got Michael Phelps, one of the greatest Olympians, Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players, LeBron James.
No, the greatest tennis player of all time.
Okay, fair. I'll put some respect on her name. Taylor Swift, the goat of pop music, Ariana Grande, Beyonce, The Weeknd, some other guys, Mark Zuckerberg, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal. We've got Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Bruno Mars, Elizabeth Holmes, who, if you guys haven't heard about her, she ripped some very, very powerful people off and is not doing so well anymore. Anyway, a couple others, Kaylee Cuoco, Adam Driver, Timothy Chalamet, who I think like all women are like crazy about right now. In politics, we have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have Mohammed bin Salman, who is the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Kim Jong-un. So some of the millennials who are in power are maybe, well, aside from Alexandria, she's all right. She's all right by me. But like these other guys, I think there's also the president of like Venezuela is this like 35-year-old crypto bro, which things aren't going so well down there. We're not doing great on the world leaders front. Let me just say it like that.
I was just going to mention that a lot of your lists are more pop culture.
They're more pop culture people who are in like, the actors, musicians, sports stars, people like that.
So what's been the major events that have occurred during the millennial time?
So we've had some interesting ones. The first millennials started out with kind of things like the AIDS epidemic, the war on drugs, the Iran-Contra, Chernobyl, the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, Black Monday stock market crash, and this is where I was born. In 1989, the most important event is like the fall of the Berlin Wall. We have the Tiananmen Square protests, the first Gulf War. We have some kind of fun stuff like the video games boom, which starts in the 90s and has continued till now. We have the creation of the World Wide Web, or the internet as we know it today. A couple of less fun things, the LA riots, World Trade Center bombings in 1993, end of apartheid in South Africa in 94, the Oklahoma City bombing in 95. Back to some fun stuff. Medical cannabis legalization in California in 1996. That's kind of a big step for moving forward with certain things. Dolly the sheep.
Did they decide that Dolly was really cloned?
Well, I mean, they're doing a whole lot of really interesting science nowadays with cloning and stuff. So I think probably.
Okay.
Maybe. Well, they're trying to clone like woolly mammoths right now. So if they can do that, I think they cloned a sheep in 96. Then we have like things like the death of Princess Diana in 97. the Monica Lewinsky scandal in the White House in 98, the dot-com boom bubble in 99 to 01. And I think this is probably an event that the next event is an event where a lot of millennials of my generation really start paying attention to things, is Columbine in 1999, one of these first mass shootings that happens. That was a really, really big event for a lot of people. We have Y2K, and then the next massive event we have, which I, like you, with the Challenger explosion, I remember exactly where I was when 9/11 happened.
Oh, right.
Some other kind of larger things. We had third wave feminism is most closely associated with my generation. The Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, Hurricane Katrina, the second energy crisis in 05 to 08 when gas shoots up to like $5 a gallon, and then the Great Recession in 07, 08, which is probably kind of the tail end of the formative events that a lot of millennials went through before we turned like 20, 30. So those are kind of the big major ones. As far as presidential administrations that we have had none. But, I mean, that's a result of the presidential age being 35, right? You have to be at least 35, and nobody in this country is going to vote in some 40-year-old kid, right? I don't see that happening anytime soon. So we'll eventually get there, but most of us would be senators right now, at absolute most, in the political system of America. So some characteristics of millennials. We are quick to adapt to new technologies. We grew up with cell phones, we grew up with computers, we grew up with the internet. So we are kind of uniquely poised as a generation that gets what life was like before these things, learned as they were being implemented into society, and now we are kind of the most tech-savvy generation out of all of them, even when you compare us to Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And it's crazy. I've heard stories about Gen Z are very, very like tech illiterate, which surprises me a lot. But I guess it's just the way that everything is moved to touchpads. Everything's like on your like little iPhone touchpad right now, and that's most of the operating systems on computers. And anyway, so there's that. We are the best educated generation. 40 to 60% of millennials have a bachelor's. It's a very wide range. I wonder why that is so wide. Compared to just 25% of boomers. We are racially and ethnically diverse. I think you said that boomers I assume boomers. This is in the United States. United States.
Of course.
You said that boomers were 72%.
72% white.
White. Millennials are 44% non-white, which would put us at like 56% white. So that's a marked decrease.
That's big.
We live with our parents longer, like deep into our 20s. We marry much, much later, if at all. I saw a map of the United States with the various age ranges, and the earliest people are getting married is in Utah, a Mormon state, so this is a religious thing, and they're getting married at like 24, like 25 years old still. Like, that's pretty late. And like in our state here in Illinois, I think it was 30 years old, which is funny because that's when I got married. That's like bang on. So, yeah, we're getting married later. We are socially conscious. We value experience over material possessions. Now, this is something I've heard, and I feel like it's something that's associated with all these articles I saw being written about don't spend your money on things, spend your money on experiences. So personally, for me, I'm not entirely sure that that's true. Maybe compared to boomers, we value experiences over possessions, but you guys have the bucket list thing, so you guys clearly value experience as well. You guys want to go out and do things, right?
Right, but maybe during the course of our life, we compartmentalized our lives. We had work, career, family, then bucket list.
Okay.
Maybe,
so maybe that was it.
Maybe.
Okay. Millennials are a very large segment of the U.S. population. We comprise of 21.7% of the U.S. population. Our experiences from the Great Recession heavily informs our worldviews because at that time, a ton of us were either entering the job market or very soon going to enter the job market. So we entered a job market that was so difficult to get through and to even get a job within. It was a tough time. So that heavily dictates how we interact with our careers and our working lives,
Right,
I think.
right. And I think that, we have discussed this, I think, a while back, that
Yeah.
when I came out of college, most people had their job already. They interviewed
Right.
on campus, they had a job already, or within a couple of months, they had the job that they wanted. I
Right.
believe it's documented that millennials have to switch maybe 5 times to get to the place that they want to be.
Right.
So
right.
the climate and
It's very different.
it's
very different.
very different.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
it's interesting because, like, I've had this conversation with other people as well, and a family member of mine, my sister-in-law's father, he just thinks that millennials are not willing to, like, stick it out and tough it through and just, stay with the same company and work your way up the ranks, because that's how it works in his company. And they just promoted some guy who's been there for 25 years up to this position. And I'm like,
right. That
yeah,
just
I
doesn't
get it. But that's one company out of all these other companies. And I mean, I've worked in Fortune 15, corporate world, and my experience is vastly different than that. So
Well, and I myself, my first 3 positions, I experienced mergers.
oh, those are so tough. I also experienced a merger. It was
Right.
so hard because everybody's getting axed, right?
So I was, and 2 times I was the mergee, and once I was the merger. So, it was a tough place to be. And that started when, millennials are on the earth, and it just gets worse from there. So that was probably in the 80s.
Okay,
80s.
that kind of starts happening where these things like
Yeah.
hostile takeovers or companies
Yeah.
absorbing other companies starts occurring. That sounds about right,
Right.
based on everything. Millennials are also heavily dependent on technology. We spend 6 hours a day on average on digital media, which I personally, I'm finding I'm having some issues with this. Our phones have this screen time thing that tends to track how much time you're actually spending interacting with your phone. And I was pretty happy that on a daily, I was only spending 2.5 hours on my phone this last week, 2.5 hours every day on my phone. 'Cause some of these previous weeks, it's been like 4 hours a day or 5 hours a day. And I'm like, really? That's
Maybe you were
kind of
researching.
bad. That's kind of
Maybe
bad.
you were researching for Mom, please.
Maybe I was. Maybe I was. I wasn't. But let's
Well,
say I was. Let's say I was.
I have been out to dinner, and millennials, somebody will be at the other end of the table and they're texting them as opposed to talking to them.
Yeah, that's
So it is
something
the phone,
we started.
The phone is a problem, and that high need
bit.
to research right away, get the information right away. So go ahead.
Yeah, those instant dopamine hits that we crave as millennials. So we spend a lot of time on social medias, which would be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, so on and so forth. We prefer online shopping instead of brick and mortar shopping. 66% of millennials prefer that. We are early adopters of technology. We tend to want to be the first to have things like that. So we're the first to want to be involved in AI, virtual reality stuff, driverless vehicles, these types of technologies. We look to improve our lives through what we buy, not necessarily just to display status. So this is also something that I find kind of funny, because I just recently bought a new iPhone because I was working. People were starting to make fun of me because I only had one camera. I had one camera on the back of my phone, and people are like, when I'm taking pictures at like Christmas and stuff, yeah, right, you got the 3, right? So when I'm taking pictures at like Christmas, people are like, hey, who's this jamoke with the one phone, one camera phone? And I'm like, Bro, this is like a 4 or 5-year-old phone. It's not that
Eric,
old.
you should not succumb to peer pressure.
Well, I didn't succumb to peer pressure, but because the Mom Please podcast does do some recording on some, basic devices, I did get myself the nicer camera now, so you can see the quality of my podcast is going to improve. But that's an example of me wanting a thing to improve my life, to have a value or a use, right? Not just because I want the status of having a brand new iPhone, right?
So you feel it's utilitarian?
It could be more utilitarian. I could have gotten an actual camera that is separate from this and maybe gotten a phone that's not quite so much. But, at the same time, it works. It's easy. I know how to use it. I've used it before to do that. And I know tons and tons of YouTubers who are recording their shit on iPhones too. So I'm not the only one. Okay. And these people have tens of millions of followers. So, more things about millennials. We have a high desire to make positive social changes. However, are millennials kind of slacktivists? Are millennials armchair activists? Do we just sit at our computers and type our comments on the internet, on Facebook and on Twitter, and throw those out there and pretend like that's activism? Because I feel like my generation is guilty of this. I feel like a lot of us don't walk the talk. We will say these things, but how many of us go out to soup kitchens? How many of us are doing Habitat for Humanity projects? How many of us are volunteering at food pantries? I am not so sure it's that many of us. So that's something that,
right.
I think maybe that your generation maybe was better about that, perhaps.
And maybe you're better at social activism. So providing commentary and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, perhaps.
But you're right. Maybe you're not in the soup kitchen. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in general, millennials are liberal leaning in the United States as a voting bloc. Some important issues for millennials include human rights, gender equality, and climate change. We as individuals have a desire to reduce our carbon footprint. So we like to try to address climate change through the small ways that we can. We are trending.
Are you driving an electric car?
Am I driving an electric car right now?
Uh-huh. Guilty.
No. But you saw those news stories about all those Teslas getting stuck in the minus 20-degree weather at the superchargers. It was so cold, the chargers were not working.
Okay, move on.
That's an infrastructure issue. We need to, Anyway, so millennials are trending in the direction of diversity with the inclusion of race, ethnicity, culture, and religion. However, with the religion thing, I'm pretty sure, and I think you want to talk about this a little bit later, we do not highly identify and associate with organized religion.
Right. Okay.
So that's a little bit different than being inclusive of religion. In terms of marriage trends, we are delaying marriage, like I said, for cohabitation and life partnerships, things that are not strictly legally recognized marriages, but, if you engage in them, have a lot of the same benefits and tax breaks as marriages. We are redefining long-term relationships a little bit. I think after seeing many of our parents divorce and maybe thinking that monogamy is not exactly a long-term thing for humans, my generation has started this trend of open relationships, non-monogamy. Yeah, you can say whatever you want about it, Mom. Non-monogamy and polyamorous relationships, which would be like a group of people in love with each other or in a relationship with each other, I guess. Something like that. There's a very interesting...
I think it's just hard enough to keep one relationship afloat.
Yeah, I agree.
A whole bunch of people.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, modern dating trends now are such that people are struggling. I think that people are a little unhappy, and there are a ton of podcasts that are cropping up out there that are, people talking about these issues. There's like the Fresh and Fit podcast, there's the Whatever podcast, and you can say whatever you want about their red pill kind of right-leaning messages, but they're kind of out there tackling a lot of these modern day dating issues where some people definitely, like you say, one relationship is enough to handle at one time with one person, and a lot of people nowadays tend to be talking to like 10 people at once, trying to entertain this relationship and that relationship and this relationship, and it's tough out there. I want to talk about this later. We'll move on, but I would like to come back to this because I think it's very interesting. In terms of our parenting, we tend to be responsive and supportive of our children, and even to the point of leniency with our kids, which is very different than I remember being raised. I remember having a little bit of discipline instilled in me. So that's I think, a marked difference. We tend to include our own children in the rule-setting process, which is not something I had as a kid, for sure.
Oh, okay, wait a second. I gotta call.
I mean, come on. There were rules. I had to follow them, right?
I know. But for instance, when you guys came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to get allowance now," I say, "Okay, you make the choice. You can either get X number of dollars per week, and then you can't ask me for anything else. And if something comes along that you really need or want, and you don't have the money, you will just have to wait for it, or." You can.
I remember like working like little odd jobs here and there to save up for like a PlayStation 2 when I was a kid. I remember that kind of arrangement. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
And it was, you were given.
I guess
choice.
we were included. Okay, fair enough. I might have been like 6 years old at the time, so I maybe not remember that conversation now.
Well, and every sport that you participated in, you chose to do.
That's true. I do. So yes, that is true. That is definitely true. So we also have a desire as millennials to build children who have a high emotional IQ. We want our kids to understand their emotions, be highly in tune with their emotions, and know how to deal with them and handle them. I don't know how well that's going. We can get into that a bit later. In terms of our friends and our networking, we tend to do both face-to-face and social media interactions. We have things like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Upwork, Twitter, and other social medias as kind of the primary ways we not only stay in touch with our friends, but also ways where we market ourselves and network professionally. So these represent both ways to keep in touch casually and ways to keep in touch professionally.
So is it your experience that you always are, that I see millennials managing their image?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think one of the biggest things is Instagram nowadays is where a lot of people are interacting. And I kind of view Instagram as a bit of a dating app in and of itself. It's kind of like a free dating app because, there you can post pictures of yourself on there and they can, be you like in a swimsuit or you looking nice, you hanging out with your buddies, and maybe you slide into some person's DMs or they slide into your DMs, and all of a sudden you gotta, you're in a talking stage or something with people. So, I do feel like there's a lot of image management because I feel like this is a way that we connect, and we don't want to portray ourselves as sad and lonely and, not doing well. Like who wants to throw themselves out there and be like, look how crappy my life is, So there's a lot of massaging and a lot of management of our social media.
Where are you guys at professionally?
Well, we are looking for a couple of different things than your generation. We are looking for a healthy work-life balance. And that is a strong inclination towards work that we find really meaningful and that gives us a high degree of satisfaction. So instead of just working strictly for financial gain, we tend to prefer our family and friends and our time spent away from work. Whereas I think that might be different in your generation, where you guys got a lot of value of the work that you did. Many of us desire flex work arrangements, working from home, consulting positions. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. So we have some of these quotes that I think are very definitive of my generation in the in working culture. And that would be like rise and grind, or I'm building my empire, or I'm on my grind set, or get your bag, this hustle culture idea that I personally am less of a fan of, for various reasons, and we can discuss that later. But yeah, I have my own views on that. So we as a generation are risk takers. We are autonomy enjoyers. So we like having control. We like being masters of our domains. And we may prefer freelancing as a result. We may prefer to have a situation that we feel like we have more control over. Yeah.
Does the work environment need to align with your personal values?
For me personally, yeah. So I worked for AT&T for 4 years. And one of the reasons why I ultimately left was I didn't feel like very good only really contributing to making really wealthy people already more wealthy. I didn't feel like the work that I was doing was meaningful in any way other than being a cog in a big system that just produced value for shareholders.
Right.
And personally, for me, this is the same way I feel about the hustle culture thing. It's kind of I'm a little less enthused on capitalism right now. So, I'm not really super jazzed about just, 2/3 of the value of my labor going straight to people above me. I'm
right.
less interested. I want all the work that I do, all that value to come to me, or like most of it. If I have to pay other people who are working for me, that's fine. But I want to be in charge of that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So we have a desire for our jobs to have that meaning and purpose, and the ability to provide personal and professional growth and development. So that's that seeking a work culture that aligns with our values,
Okay.
Yeah. So financially, we're not as well off as boomers in some ways, but apparently better off in other ways. So millennials on average have about $30,000 in student debt right now, which I think is a pretty big number. That's our 30K by 30.
Yeah.
So, and 70%, this is interesting though, 70% of millennials are actively saving for retirement. And there is some information out there that does suggest that we will retire earlier than boomers will be retiring on average. I'm not so sure I see that yet, but hey, a lot of things can change. And, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of boomers are probably going to be dying pretty soon. And so that wealth is going to transfer somewhere, right? We are less likely to own large possessions at this point in time in our lives. So that would be like houses and cars. We tend to pay more as a percentage of our income for that housing.
Right.
We tend to spend more on entertainment. We spend more on various forms of healthcare due to rising healthcare costs, and that includes eye and dental care. This is a stat that shocked me. Only 25% of millennials have a credit score over 700, which 700's all right. It's not like amazing. You up there in the 800s, you're doing all right. But I have a credit score over 700, and I guess it's very, very difficult for my generation to actually generate good credit and to keep payments going.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that's quite concerning. According to the Federal Reserve, the net worth of boomers is about 12 times that of millennials, but that makes sense given you guys have had a lot more time to generate that wealth. However, at the same time, at the same age, millennials do earn 20% less than boomers adjusted for inflation. And this is kind of a result of a lot of middle-class wage stagnation that has happened since the 1980s and may have been a result of certain decisions that are being made around that time. Millennials tend to focus a lot on financial planning and investment strategies, and there is data out there to suggest that millennials are more sophisticated than their boomer counterparts in terms of how they tend to invest to develop that long-term wealth. So they have a bit more nuanced strategies and different investment strategies that they pursue that apparently are a little bit more conscientious than their boomer counterparts. Moving on, we have emotional IQ. Millennials are pretty empathetic, and compassionate. We are oriented towards social justice, and we do have self-awareness and tend to practice self-care. We tend to exercise at higher rates than other generations and are therefore in good physical health. However, what about the mental side? There are a lot higher instances of mental health diagnoses among millennials than boomers, and that maybe could be explained by some reluctance for boomers in general to seek mental health care. But I feel like we got a lot of bullshit to deal with, and a lot of our neuroses and psychoses stem from that, so that might just be how it is. And we are apparently pretty likely to seek treatment for our mental health issues.
Right. I will say that the boomer generation did not grow up as children in an environment where mental health was recognized. But as we became adults and matured, we are now champions of mental health awareness and more likely to seek therapies for ourselves and for others, and really remove the stigma of somebody getting mental health treatment.
Sure. Well, that's good. All right, now on to some of the fun stuff, the culture wars. So millennials are highly influenced by pop culture, celebrity culture, fashion, beauty, and trends. We're kind of a lonely generation, and Taylor Swift style megastars or BTS, that K-pop band, these mega global acts are kind of keying in on this, and they have started marketing themselves in a way that form these parasocial relationships, which is essentially the fans thinking that they have a personal relationship with the artist or whoever, so in my generation, these like Taylor Swift, she'll do like a birthday greeting for you, right? Or she'll reach out to you personally and, say something nice if you're having a crappy day. She has this like direct line to her fans, and, I'm sorry, Tay-Tay, but you're not these people's friends. You know why you're doing this. It makes you $5 billion in your Eras tour, right? But that's my generation. We eat that up, and it kind of scares me a little bit. I worry for us because I wonder, all this technology and all this time spent on social medias, on Facebook, is this not good, right? So,
I think
that concerns me. And you know what really concerns me? Okay, so these same parasocial relationships form with like politicians, and that's why I think you had the rise of like the cult of personality around a guy like Donald Trump. Because I think all these people think that this guy is like their best friend, right? So I think that's where it gets like dangerous, because you create a generation of people who are highly susceptible to the people that they are fans of, and that's concerning.
Because this becomes a primary form of communication.
Yeah, your phone becomes your life.
You are losing the ability to communicate face to face and to understand the nuanced conversation that you would have, not say, for instance, in texting.
Right.
You just
having a conversation in person with somebody, it's hard.
You lose
It's a skill.
You lose the ability to read another person and to be
Yeah.
empathic towards them. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you're seeing your generation is seen as empathic, because I think a lot of the empathy is taken away with how they choose to communicate.
Yeah, I think my generation might be empathetic, but I don't know necessarily if we are sympathetic. I don't know if we can see from another person's perspective and think, oh, well, that's why they're doing that thing. I've personally struggled with that in my life, and I've had to think outside. I've had to like pull away from my own perspective quite a bit to relate to people a lot. So, I think it's a difficult thing to do, and I especially think for my generation, it's a difficult thing to do. And I might have a reason for that. We might talk about that in a little bit. So that's something. In terms of some other stuff, in terms of the culture, we are the first, and we will be the only generation to have grown up alongside things like the internet, which the internet itself introduced such a wide variety of cultures and styles to us. The world is now, the information is globalized. We can go see, instead of like grabbing a Nat Geo from the bookstore, seeing what people are doing in Africa, we can just look on the internet, or see what people are doing in Europe or Asia and see all these different things, So the world is a much more global place nowadays.
It is very global, right?
So this tends to lead millennials to be highly creative and artistic compared to previous generations, because we've been exposed to a more globalized world. And this, however, could possibly be a link to something that I find a little detestable in society nowadays. Apparently, the number one most desirable job among people of my generation and younger generations is to be a social media influencer. And I know I sit here as a guy with a podcast trying to be a bit of a social media influencer.
What are we doing? Right.
Well, yeah. I'm not exactly not guilty of this myself. But I did have a career prior to this. Okay. So, it's not like I did this. I'm just looking to be a social media influencer. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, not everybody can be a social media influencer, right? Like, you gotta have doctors, you gotta have lawyers, you gotta have mechanics, plumbers, electricians, so on and so forth. Like we gotta keep society running, right? The lights gotta stay on, right? If everybody's a social media influencer, how many of us will it take to screw in that light bulb?
True that.
So I'm wondering, a little bit about that. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief rundown on boomers and millennials. And yeah, so we're pretty different generations, I think. And I think one of the things that gets to me the most, or one of the things that concerns me the most, is like what we were just talking about, millennials spending a significant amount of time with their cell phones. This is how we connect with the world. We're a little bit of a mess without our phones. We shop, we do research, we just check answers to basic questions. We get Uber Eats, we socialize, we work on our phones. Everything is happening on our phones. And, one of the biggest issues with this is everything today is about immediate and instant gratification. These instant on-demand dopamine hits that we can get just by opening up our phone and looking at something that makes us feel good on our phone, or playing a game, or, whatever it is. I think this, along with this kind of idea that millennials were raised with the idea of each of us being like a special and unique snowflake, it makes us less tolerant of ideas that are outside of our worldview, I think. So I think that we are actually less able to confront difficult information that conflicts with what we already know. And we, as a result, kind of seek out these, what we call echo chambers, that is essentially, you screaming out into the void, and then a million people returning your exact sentiment to you, giving you that good feeling of, oh, I'm validated in how I feel about this. Right. My position is correct because I think it's like, how could 1 million Bon Jovi fans be wrong, right? He must be good. Yeah.
Boomers are, and he is good, by the way.
He's not too bad.
Boomers are different in that regard, in that we like to discuss and debate and try to understand what the other person, what influences the way they're decisioning or how they are thinking. And so they are great. They are great debaters, and we will often find ourselves saying, well, tell me more about that, or why do you think that way, or did you ever consider this or consider that? So I think we are different in that regard.
I definitely think so.
And we were not raised to feel that we were special or unique.
Yeah, well, unlucky, huh?
No. We grew up with the golden rule. That we should treat
others as you want to be treated.
As you want to be treated. We grew up with ask not what your country can do for you, but what can you do? What you can do for your country. We grew up in that kind of mindset, so there was a moral encoding to all of it all the time, and so it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to see people of your generation. Like, I think, wow, why can't they be more empathic towards that person? Why can't they understand that person's walk? Everybody has their own journey, and we should be more responsive. Although I do think you guys are incredibly socially conscious, and you're so politically correct that I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
You've wrecked
I think we're politically overcorrect.
Yeah,
we've kind of politically overcorrected.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about charity.
Okay.
So our findings on charity is that I thought, wrongly so, that millennials would be more generous with their money.
Okay.
Or excuse me,
you thought that boomers would be more generous.
And actually, millennials are about twice as much.
Really?
Provide twice as much dollars. They spend about $13,000 a year. Boomers
annually. Really?
Boomers are $6,000 a year, a little bit over $6,000 a year.
Wow.
So, but I think that what we've seen is that the millennials view charitable giving to gain an opportunity or experience or grow their influence, grow their
that sounds a little bit more brand.
They're very careful how they spend their money. They make sure that they're participating in NGOs or not-for-profits that are doing good things with their money.
Sure.
And so they're conscious of where their money goes to.
Yeah.
And a good 90% of millennials get involved in some kind of organization to increase their own skill set and get involved to be seen.
So we're looking for something out of this relationship. This is not necessarily purely benevolent, altruistic.
Right.
Although some would argue that there is no such thing as a purely altruistic act. Okay. It's always to make you feel good about yourself.
Okay. Well, it does. You do feel good about yourself.
You do.
The difference is that 84% of millennials participate in charitable endeavors.
Okay.
Seek a leadership position within that charitable community.
What percent? What
84%. 84%.
That's for seeking leadership?
Within a charitable community.
Okay.
And then 74% seek public recognition of their efforts, whereas only 19% of boomers care about that. But a boomer feels a boomer feels intrinsically good about giving. They still get something out of it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's still a little bit about that. Okay.
And
do you think, okay, I've got a question. Boomers are spending less money. Do you think boomers spend more time?
Yes.
Like we said, right? Like they're doing like the soup kitchens and they're
Right.
doing the food
Right.
pantries and
Right.
yeah.
Right. Time, talent, and energy. That's what
Yeah.
boomers are spending more of, and less
Okay.
of their monies.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And then I think I just want to jump right into religion at this point.
Okay.
Okay. And
I mean, that dovetails nicely. You know, religious stuff is usually about charitable
giving, right?
Yeah.
So millennials do not go to church, and they are considered the first unchurched generation. This it's in contrast with boomers, who are generally deeply religious or spiritual and participate in some form of an organized religion. Only 2 in 10 millennials believe church is even important, and 59% have dropped. Yeah, 59% have dropped out of organized religions, and 35% are actually anti-church.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to just take a minute or two to discuss your church experience and your spiritual experience, and I can contrast that with my personal experience as well.
Sure. So I was raised Christian. I believe the denomination specifically is Union Church of Christ. And
United Church of Christ.
United Church of Christ. Okay, United Church of Christ. And I mean, compared to basically every other religion that I knew, other people, like, we had Catholic kids, you know, in our neighborhood, and you know, various other religions. But the Catholicism was like way stricter. You know, you had to go to classes on Wednesdays after school for religious class. You had to do all this stuff. And for me, it was basically just go to church. And, you know, when I was younger, we went every Sunday. We were not what they call, what is it, Christmasers or
Priesters.
Priesters?
Christmas,
yeah,
Easter.
People who show up on Christmas and Easter only. So we went pretty much every week, and we did go to, you know, Bible school and stuff. Like in the summers, I think we went to a couple of these things called Vacation Bible School, which was essentially like camp. You know, some kids get sent to camp, we got sent to Bible school. And then I think, you know, I didn't think too much of it. You know, I think it was just a thing we did until I was about 12 or 13 years old. And that's when communion happens. So this is when you are a Christian, you declare your, I guess, dedication, or you declare your faith to the church.
And I think you're speaking of confirmation.
Confirmation. Yeah, not communion. Confirmation is the word I was looking for. Thank you for clarifying that. So confirmation is essentially you as a 13-year-old declaring your faith in your religion and your faith in your church and your devotion to it, essentially. And, you know, I'm gonna be honest, I was super checked out, you know, during all of this, which the funniest thing is I think that we had to like write a little essay at some point about it. And the guy who was running the thing, let's just call him Jim, he felt like my essay was super, super good and that like I should pursue the path of pastorhood or, you know, whatever it is. And I'm like sitting there like, man, I got a test on Monday in math class. I got baseball practice, you know, to handle. You know, this is not, I'm not concerning myself with this. So, you know, I was never, as a young person, highly invested in religion. I was never really, really committed to it or dedicated to it. When I went to like university, when I was 18, I went to a Catholic university and I saw some people who were absolutely very into the church and very into their beliefs. And, you know, some of the courses I even had at university, I had to give speeches on religion, on the Catholic religion, and some of the people in the audience were less than enthused about my take on what was going on. So absolutely not really, really super committed to the religion. But that's not to say that I don't see some value in having been part of that, or some value in the concept of religion in general, I do still consider myself, I wouldn't say religious. I consider myself to have a belief in a higher power, in a higher existence. From like a scientific reason, I'm more of a Higgs and Boggs particle kind of guy. You know, what is the most basic level of matter? How does something happen from nothing? What is the mechanism for that? If it's not some sort of higher power, what is it? We don't understand it right now. But you know, I think for me, what kind of turns me off of religion a little bit, and I'm not going to be so silly as to say, oh, religion is responsible for all these atrocities in the world, all these wars, because secularism is also responsible for many atrocities and many wars. World War II was not a war of religion. It was a secular war.
Right.
The Great Leap Forward for China, where 30 million Chinese people starved to death because of industrialization. That's a secular issue. That's not a religious issue. So I'm not the type of person that's going to bash on religion because people have done horrible things in the name of it. But I'm gonna be straight up honest. I don't necessarily trust people who are like super into religion. So that Dave guy, or Jim, that Jim guy, he had a wife, right? Her name I'm going to actually use.
Don't.
No, don't. Okay. Well, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Right.
You know who I'm talking about. So the wife, Sarah, let's just call her Sarah. She was a wacko. She was so crazy religious, and she was one of the ones who was involved in the confirmation process quite heavily, as well as several, church trips that I took, Habitat for Humanity style trips to go help people, like build homes in very poor rural areas. She was a buzzkill. She was like so weird and so so we went on a work tour trip, and a work tour trip is, well, let me just say this. Let me just say this thing. So we went on a work tour trip when I was 18, and so I'm 18 years old, and me and a couple of the other 18-year-old guys on the work tour trip want to have a couple of cigars because we're celebrating. We're like out here, we're doing good work. It's the evening. We've had a tough day of work building homes for people who live on $300 a month with multiple kids. We want to have a cigar to celebrate. We're 18 now. We go out. We were having a cigar. She comes out and she's like, what the heck are you guys doing? This is not appropriate. This is not okay with the religion of our church. And it's like, since when did God say that you can't smoke tobacco? I'm pretty sure that's not in the Bible. All right. So that's my thing. With organized religion, I struggle with certain people that are attracted to it, because I think certain people are attracted to it for the wrong reasons, and I think they tend to get kind of a powerful voice in some of these church communities. I mean, I don't know how you feel about like mega churches and stuff, Mom, but I hate them. I think that's a terrible blight on American society.
Let me tell you my journey, and I'll try to be
tell me
brief.
yours.
So the difference between you and I is I did grow up in a Catholic home, and everybody we knew was Catholic, and we also went to Catholic school. So our whole social construct, our entire social environment revolved around the church. All our friends were Catholic. Everything we did was Catholic. Everything. And I had a comeuppance with the church in my 20s when the church decided to just take pastors who were, abusing children and move them from parish to parish.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
And they were not criminally responsible at that point.
Right.
And I couldn't live with that, and I couldn't live with the idea that I myself also could never be the Pope. And what I mean by that is the Pope could never be a female. That women are
you're not allowed in like the priesthood. You're barred from that. Yeah.
So I do find a religion, the United Church of Christ, where the playing field is level, and a lot of the dogma that exists in the Catholic Church is much more relaxed.
Right.
And for me, because I grew up in church, I always found solace when I would sit in church and in high church and hear the music and the organ and the singing. And it always was a comforting place for me. So for me, in times of trouble in my life, when my parents died, when I divorced, this was an important place in my life. It holds
Right.
an important place for me. So I will always be religious oriented. I will always have a place that I can go to find that feeling that is calming, and just that hand on my shoulder that says it's going to be okay, Carol.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that could just for anybody else, that could just be a higher being. But for me, it's a
Sure.
place of comfort. So, well, that's an interesting discussion to have. I'm glad
Yeah.
we talked
Yeah.
about that. So what are you millennials concerned about?
What are we concerned about? Ooh, it's kind of a long list, but I think millennials are in general concerned about the environment is a really, really big one. Housing is a huge one. Free speech is a huge issue that's going on right now. Human rights issues, and I think abortion is a huge one. Body autonomy is a huge one. LGBTQIA plus rights is a huge one. And I even think, and this is going to sound a little weird, but there's a growing movement for men's rights in my demographic and in younger demographics as well. There is Second Amendment, gun rights. That's a huge issue for us. Global instability right now is kind of a big issue, right? People think that we're teetering on the edge of like World War III at the moment. And late stage capitalism is also kind of a big thing on our minds. Now, I'm also personally concerned about privacy and security, which, we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to keep that for another conversation about technology. I'm also concerned about the wealth gap, and I am also concerned about infrastructure in the United States, like infrastructure spending. And I'm pretty worried about where to get my next slice of avocado toast. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's kind of a struggle out here, we're
Right.
right.
And
I just thought, like, it was wife's birthday this weekend, spent a lot.
And let's not forget that you're concerned about Taylor Swift's next move and the Kardashians.
Yeah. Is Taylor Swift going to stay with, her guy right now, or is she moving on, or?
Right. And, during my day of being a 20 to 40-year-old, my personal hero my influencer was Ralph Nader.
Yeah. And
okay.
Our influencer, like, ugh. Yeah.
I would say
what are boomers concerned about?
But I'd say that whole list that you mentioned, boomers are also concerned with. I would say where there is divergence is the Second Amendment rights, because a lot of boomers want to have their gun.
Yeah.
Okay. I think they probably represent some figure in the NRA.
Let's by the way, let's avoid saying the G word. I think just saying that, firearm or something like that is a little bit more. It's a YouTube thing. Don't stress too much about it.
Now you're getting all politically correct.
I know, but I have to, because I don't want to get demonetized, or I don't want this channel to be struck down, or this video to get taken down.
Okay. So boomers are really concerned about not being a burden on their children.
Yeah.
They are concerned, and that's given our age, right?
Right.
Because people are living longer, and they have. And
you're retiring now, most
incomes.
of you. Yeah.
They want to make sure they have enough financial resources to get to the finish line, so to speak. We hope our children and our grandchildren have a world that provides them with a good life. That's really hard, given all of that list.
Right. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are difficult.
That list is difficult to envision for me, that my grandchildren will have this wonderful life. I can only hope, right?
Yeah.
The world seems hostile. Economics are tough. Climate change. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Further, we worry about the next generation's ability to retire. With the large number of boomers living longer and being in situations that they're in, as they retire, we become a strain on Social Security. We are a strain on traditional pensions for payouts, and company contributions to IRAs have been minimized over the years. So we do worry about your ability to have a retired life, right?
Yeah. We worry about that too.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
So, yeah. So in that vein, I'm okay. You know what? I'm taking the gloves off a little bit. We might get a little bit spicy here, so get ready, Mom.
Okay, I'm ready.
I think I'm gonna say it. I think boomers kind of ruined some things. We're getting into the culture wars here now, and you do see all this news out there about how this is what boomers have ruined, and this is what boomers have ruined, and this is what boomers have ruined, and I can't say that some of the things are things that I feel like I disagree with. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm gonna throw some things out here that I think the boomers have made or since the boomers have existed, have become significantly worse for my generation.
Okay.
The first thing, the big one, is the economy. The economy. So, things like entry-level jobs don't exist anymore. You have to have like 2 or 3 years of experience to be considered for entry-level jobs. So, unpaid internships are the standard. Actually not getting paid for work that you do for a company is the standard for at least a year, more or less. Well, maybe not at least a year, but my wife has been doing her internship for almost a year now. She had to get a full year, so that's a thing. The middle class is essentially gone. You have such a crazy gap between the wealthy and the poor that there is essentially no middle class anymore.
Right.
Stagnation of wages since the 1980s has caused, ballooning CEO compensations. Mm-hmm. We have the cost of upper education being prohibitive for many people, which, that that $30,000 in student debt number, that comes into play there. There's a lack of housing. There's, for the last couple of years, there was crazy inflation, due to COVID, but it's still there. There's this wild focus of every corporation cares only about the value that they can generate for their shareholders and like nothing else. The excessive use of credit, the idea that you can buy the present by selling the future is, something that has essentially all happened over the course of boomers being the ones who are generally running companies and generally the ones driving the economy. All these things have contributed to an environment where millennials are probably going to be the very first generation in the history of the human race that are going to be less wealthy than their parents.
Right.
So, that's something that we do feel some negative emotions and negative feelings, some resentment about, and we can't say that every boomer is personally responsible for that, but boomers as a whole, this is a crazy stat to me right here. The housing market. Boomers own 42% of the homes in America and are only 20.6% of the population. So they own twice as many homes as they should. And there are so many laws, so many zoning laws, so many restrictions. They're not encouraging contractors to build homes, probably because the population is going to decrease. And if you have too many homes when the population decreases, then the housing market's going to crash like it did in 07 and 08. So there's reasons why that's happening. It's not good reasons. There are reasons, though.
Right.
We have, there's a lot of stuff, spiraling costs of upper education. It was like $45,000 a year for you to send me to school, right? $50,000 a year for you to send me to school. These things like, primary education, how good your primary education being tied to your tax base is an insane idea. So like poor people are just fucked. Like, okay, Changes in the style of education to suit agendas, like the No Child Left Behind stuff that is extremely, extremely detrimental to education nowadays, and how my generation is pushing their kids through school. And then you have like this phenomenon of pulling the ladder up behind you by not having enough kids, not getting to that 2.2 kids per couple replacement rate. And then immigration policy changes made by the Clinton administration that prevented mass immigration to actually replace the jobs that we're losing, or the people that we are losing. You know, if we let people immigrate more, then it's less of a problem because you don't have to have that replacement level birth rate. But there are policies in place that are causing massive issues there. And we know because there's a huge migrant crisis on the Texas border right now. Right. So there's a lot of stuff going on that, you know, has not been so great. And this has all been like economically focused things to try and address certain issues that I think happened in your time. But they've kind of just turned out not so good, you know, because you guys experienced a ton of economic hardships throughout. Like, it wasn't all sunshine and roses, right? Like, what are some of the things that you guys went through?
No. I mean, I think I hear what you're saying, that the age of the boomers are the people who were in places of importance.
Yeah, and places of decision making. Yeah,
right. And that leadership has caused a lot of things that have not gone great,
right,
for the subsequent generation. But you know, there was a lot of economic downturns during the boomers eras as well.
Right.
You know, we have the embargo on oil in '75. We have stagflation, slow economic growth coupled with high inflation. The federal government, the Fed, struggles to combat stagflation. Their policies, they were not well versed on how to do that at the time. And a recession is defined as more than 2 quarters of downturn. And, you know, we're talking about a couple years of downturns.
Right.
So that, you know, that's pretty significant.
Yes.
The structural change of the economy from a U.S. economy to a global economy has hurt your generation.
It has.
And that, I don't know that was preventable.
I don't think that was preventable. Like globalization is hard to prevent. It's not something that individuals can. Yeah.
However, a lot of because we had high union wages, manufacturing ceased to exist here, and it was cheaper to send things overseas.
Yeah.
So that occurs.
Yes.
Labor strikes, fiscal challenges. You know, the government during the Vietnam War, creating larger social programs, has a hard time in history to balance its budget.
Right.
And now we don't even care about balancing the budget.
Yeah, now the Clinton administration was so long ago at that, and like everybody's like, no, spend.
Right. And, you know, the housing bubble created by Clinton, essentially, who set out to ease housing policies, and you could get money for a house that you really couldn't afford, which, by the way, was the godfather of that was Andrew Cuomo, who was...
That's kind of funny, you know. It's interesting.
And so, you know, that put people underwater, and those people were millennials. So we've seen plenty of downturns brought on by policymakers. I think corporations dealt with economic downturn by cutting costs and maximizing at all costs the return on investment to the investor, to the shareholder.
There was a guy who was like very, very influential in this. If our viewers want to look into more of that, this guy Jack Welch was essentially like a business mogul, and he taught many, many, many people, many MBAs, that this is how you make a business work. This is how you do it. You look for that short term, those cost cutting measures. You try and make, you know, everything cheaper and cheaper and cheaper until, you know, it's no longer a good product anymore.
Right.
That's so if you guys want to look into that a little bit more, look up that guy, Jack Welch.
Right. And so I agree that these things have come about from the millennials, but I don't know what influence I could have personally had on that. So I think
Yeah.
it was the policies and the leadership and corporations.
Yeah.
And so I think, but I do think it's getting better because I see movement for millennials in terms of startups. I see movement in terms of entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And, it's like in a weird way, it's going back to the days that my grandparents were around where there were mom and pop
Yeah.
stores.
Yeah, it is like that in a little bit, but it is nowadays the barriers for entry in most arenas are very, very high. So it's very difficult. Like, you're not going to go out there and start like a mom and pop internet service provider and compete against the likes of like Xfinity and AT&T, right?
No, I'm not talking in that regard. I'm just talking about millennials, I think, feel more empowered to try something.
Yeah, no, I think that we are
Right?
we are risk takers. Yeah,
I don't think my generation wanted to get a good corporate job and get into a leadership position.
I think you guys valued security, like job security,
Yeah.
and we value job satisfaction a little bit more, perhaps.
Right. And we had families.
Yeah.
We had mouths to feed. So
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, do we need to beat up the millennials anymore?
No,
Or the boomers anymore?
I don't think so. I think it's interesting, because we talk about this, like the difference in this kind of working culture for millennials and the job security versus job satisfaction thing. I think it's absolutely true when you look at what millennials are doing, because millennials are often chastised by boomers for being like mercenaries or not sticking it out with one company for a long period of time and moving up through the company through promotions. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but that's not really the climate that large corporations have really allowed to continue to exist in the modern working world. So you have a lack of job security, a distinct lack of job security. And I just watched this video, this poor girl getting fired after working for Cloudflare for like 4 months. And she only had 3 months of like training and then 1 month to like make sales. And these months were like in November and December, when you have Thanksgiving is a major U.S. holiday and Christmas is a major U.S. holiday. So nobody's working at this time. I worked for AT&T, and I did work over like Thanksgiving holidays sometimes and Christmas holidays. Nobody's working. So you're not making deals then. And, this poor girl gets let go for like performance reasons, right? And they couldn't even tell her what the performance reasons were. And the people firing are a random HR people. That's like not her manager, it's like people she doesn't even know, people that don't know her. So, forgive us millennials for feeling like, there's this kind of buzz quote that goes around, but corporations don't give a fuck about you.
Ouch!
I know.
Well,
but like that's kind of how we feel. So
I maybe wouldn't have said it that way, but I don't necessarily disagree. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me stuff that the boomer does better than the millennial.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that I think are actually really, really kind of key that boomers do way, way, way better than millennials. And one of the ones that I touched on earlier was unplugging from phones and apps. Like I was mentioning that some days, apparently, I'm on my phone for 4 or 5 hours and I don't even realize that. Like I think, boomers are much, much more focused in the moment. You guys are more present. You are less inclined to be like, oh, what's going on in that thing? But we are not. So I think I actually like that about boomers better. I think boomers are better parents. And I will explain that by saying one of the things I was mentioning earlier was the school systems are kind of screwed over because of No Child Left Behind. What's happening is parents, my generation as parents, have realized that this is a policy and understood that if you want your kid to go from 7th to 8th grade and they can't read, they're going to 8th grade. And we call these types of parents who push these policymakers on these policies in this direction lawnmower parents. Your generation had helicopter parents. We have lawnmower parents. So where you guys hovered over us and maybe checked in to make sure that everything was kind of going okay, and you didn't want us to like go out and just run around for hours and hours during the day playing and then come back home at dinner time. You know, you want a more structured life. Us as parents, as millennials, we will bulldoze and mow over any opposition and any hardship that our children face. And that creates weak people. That creates very weak people who cannot deal with the real world, because the real world is not nice and full of roses and sunshine. There is difficult stuff that you have to deal with sometimes. So I think that I hate that style of parenting from us, and I hope that doesn't become a long-term trend in parenting style. Other things that the boomers are better about, you guys are way less concerned about being politically correct, which I'm not a huge fan. Bless you.
Sorry.
I'm not a huge fan of being politically correct. You know, I want to say the R word and I want to say these other things, or like the YouTube rules about how you can't say certain stuff. You know, I'm less of a fan of that. It's like a free speech issue kind of. And, you know, anyway, I also think that one of the things that you guys do better is you guys have a higher respect for like authority and institutions, but at the same time, you guys also are very well aware of how to protest in ways that are actually pretty effective. You know, like the Million Man March with MLK in like the 60s on Washington, very effective protest. Vietnam War protesting, all very effective, highly visible. Whereas my generation, you have some things that are happening that, you know, protests are happening, but they're happening in ways that are, it doesn't seem like it's sending an incredibly strong message. Like take, for example, the environmentalists that are like chaining themselves at major sporting events to like a tennis post or a goal post, or there was that thing that happened in Panama where some protesters, a protester got shot by somebody because they were blocking a highway. They're blocking a roadway, and one of the people who was trying to get through just pulls out a gun and shoots him. You know, so I don't find that to be incredibly effective protest. I did not personally, and this might land me in some hot water. I'm going to say some words that people might not like, but deal with it. I personally was not a huge fan of like the way that the Black Lives Matter protesting went down in my city of Chicago. There was a huge amount of rioting and looting that happened in some of the shopping districts in our city, and not just the nice shopping districts, Black-owned neighborhood or Black-owned businesses in Black-owned neighborhoods were also torn apart. You know, there was a story about a woman who had, I think, an edible arrangements franchise in a Black neighborhood, and she was a Black business owner, and it got destroyed. You know, and I don't know what message it sends. The BLM message is Black Lives Matter, right? Which I think they're essentially what people are saying there is our lives are important too. When we are brutalized by police, when we are cast down, when things that are happening to us are due to systemic racism, you know, we also matter. You know, pay attention, you know, do something about it. But how does a bunch of people destroying a Black-owned business in a Black neighborhood help that message? I don't know. I don't understand. You know, so I was less enthused by that. You know, I'm just going to say that. So I think I
would use the example of the January 6th.
January 6th. Also, yeah, the January 6th rioting. You know, like this shit is crazy. You know, I cannot believe that something like that actually happened. Because like you know, I fully believe in the right for the American public to exercise their constitutional right to overthrow the government if they feel like it doesn't represent them or it's not where it's going for them right now. But man, the reason why that happened was just a bunch of bullshit. It was just a lie. So I can't look you know, favorably upon the stuff that happened to January 6th either. You know.
Well,
I think those two statements back to back are going to make a lot of people be like, I don't know about this guy.
I do think that stuff like this did happen during during my generation. Kent
Yeah, not
State.
everything was super clean. I'm not saying
Right.
everything was like
Not
peachy,
not
you
everything was peachy clean, but it does seem to be ramping up with more and more, and maybe it's mental health, stress. I don't know what it is, but
Maybe we don't deal with it as well. Maybe. Yeah.
there is evidence that there's more of this occurring than what has happened in the past, and that great leaders like MLK were all about peaceable protest.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
think there's something to say about that. That these leaders of your time tended to be pacifists.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Right.
so yeah, that's their social activism. I think that your generation is actually better about that. And I think the civil rights movement was incredibly important. I think second wave feminism was incredibly important. The Vietnam War protests, I think all that's very important. Even leading into like the Iraq War protests, which I think was mostly your generation protesting. I think my generation was a little bit young for that. In contrast, we have things like, third wave feminism, which I don't know if you're completely familiar with the different waves, but if you guys want to look into it, look at like what the major accomplishments of second wave feminism were versus the major accomplishments of third wave feminism, and tell me if, audience, if you guys think one was maybe a little bit, had some better accomplishments and things, maybe like Roe v. Wade back then was way more important. And you look at nowadays where Roe v. Wade has been struck down, and you think about that, and it's like, what the heck happened there between then and now, right?
Right.
So I think you guys did, your social activism was much more effective than our generation's has been. I also think that you guys have done very, very well as a generation in building wealth and having long-term careers. Like I said earlier, the most desired job among today's young people is social media influencer. So that's not great. Other stuff, traditional marital relationships, you guys are a little bit, I like personally, I'm not going to say it's better. I personally like, having, when I was dating, I dated one girl at a time. Right? I'm not out here trying to swing multiple girls, and I like the idea. I'm married, right? I am clearly fairly traditional in terms of the way I view relationships. I think your guys had more kids, straight up. That's just the truth. Can't deny that. So you guys had more kids. I think you guys actually, as a generation, have a better understanding of history and why knowing history is important and how it affects the world today. And I can even speak to myself that a little bit, where when I was younger, I remember standing in front of my cousin who had a history degree from his university saying, "Man, why would you go to college and study something useless like history? Where's that going to get you?" It was kind of a funny moment because he looks at me and he's like, "I studied history." But I mean, I think he ended up working as like a hotel manager, right? So maybe I was right. Anyway, I think that the boomers have an incredible work ethic as a generation. And you guys are very much a go-getter generation who has goals. You set goals, you have plans, you go get what you want, you take it, So I think that that's something that you do very, very well. And what's interesting is you were the last generation to experience actual military conscription.
Oh, right.
The Vietnam War was the last time that actually happened. So I think that, we go back to the ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Your generation embodies that to, the nth degree compared to my generation. So, I'm not going to rag on boomers completely. Like, yeah, you guys fucked up the economy and the housing market and all. No, but there are absolutely things that boomers have done that have made this world a pretty interesting place. Pretty cool place.
So, at the end of the day, would you say that you were happy to be a millennial? And why? Or why not?
I think I am. I think I am pretty happy to be a millennial. I think that my generation is poised to do very incredible things, very interesting things. I think I'm going to rag on the Xers a little bit. It's too bad that we don't have anybody to defend themselves about this, but Gen Xers are super, super laid back in my experience, from what I've seen, and haven't had this drive to go, do things and be great. I think that millennials feel that drive. I think our experiences with coming out into a job market that kind of didn't want us, forcing our way through the world, kind of figuring out, we have to really, really go after it. We have to get ours. We have to get our bag. We kind of have these same values and views as boomers in terms of we want to build these careers. We want to build wealth. We want to build a legacy. I do think that we share that in that regard. Oh, I really do. I think that, some incredible things will happen during our time. We might cure cancer in our time. We might, put ourselves on Mars in our time. We might do some absolutely amazing things. And I think a lot of that is because, honestly, of the motivation and the values kind of instilled in us by our boomer parents. I think honestly, boomers and millennials are probably pretty similar at the end of the day, because millennials are the children of the boomers. And you guys imparted everything you knew and all your wisdom to us, or at least as best you could. So we should turn out, right?
That's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you like being a boomer?
Well, yes, but to quote my beloved Cher, if I could turn back time. I mean,
oh, jeez.
We don't have a lot of time.
Mom, please don't get us like DMCA'd. We can only use like so much of that, right?
Okay. But in my lifetime, we have the TV.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine that people didn't have TVs. We have the TV. We have economic growth. We are socially disrupting the normative.
Yeah. I mean, you guys had the moon landing, right?
Right.
That's massive.
Technological advances. Computers, word processing. I mean, when telephones that you would pick up and would be wired, all of that. We see all of this technology, and we have adapted to it. I mean, I know we're not millennials, but we're using the internet, and we're using computers, and we're using iPads, and we're doing all kinds.
Like, look at you here on Discord, which you're probably the oldest person on Discord right now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sorry.
And, as we pursued the American dream, we started to recognize a lot of anxiety in society, and we destigmatize mental issues.
Health. Yeah.
And the importance of mental health and trying to get people help. We've transformed ourselves into people who are active. We learn new hobbies, late stage life. We're involved constantly in learning and trying to inspire the generations to come. So I think we have timeless values, and we've had remarkable experiences through our lifespan. And what I see with my boomer friends, and even boomer friends that are older, that we're welcoming every stage of life. Well, we're just not rolling over and say, 40 is fatal. 50. 60, kill yourself. We're embracing it and making it the best 60-year-old that you could possibly be, the best 70-year-old you could possibly be. And I think that's a testament to people who are resilient, and resilient for a reason, that they saw a lot of stuff in their time. So yes, I'm happy to be a boomer.
Well, great. Sounds like we're at least both happy to be part of our generation. At least we're not self-hating, right?
Yes,
That's
yes.
good. That's good.
So that's good. So
I think that kind of at least wraps up most of what we want to talk about. We didn't get to a couple of things, but that's okay. We can always include them in conversations down the road, But yeah, this was really, really great. Thank you so much, Mom. I really appreciate the conversation. Viewers, thank you guys. As always, appreciate the views, appreciate the likes and subscribes. Please make sure to hit both of those buttons on your way out. You know, it helps us know that we're making good content for you and helps us know that we should keep doing this. So, you know, make sure that you do that. We will keep producing. We got another episode planned for next month. So we'll see you then. Ciao, everyone.
Okay, ciao. Adios.